the wording they use is anything under or over 8 is unacceptable. And when I read that, I got so creeped out. As 8 is already too many legs, but when you think about like that they have less or more, you're like immediately.
I find that to be ableist.
Yeah.
Like.
All right. Welcome back to the Chemist Confessions podcast. I'm Victoria.
And I'm Gloria.
And this is a human conversation on all the skincare science we talk about on the daily. And today we are kicking off our podcast season with a deep dive into PDRN.
Yes, I think the first request we got on PDRN was like June of last year.
Right.
And there was a lot going on. We had a lot of requests. And to be honest, this is kind of a dense, difficult topic. Didn't have it in us to talk about it last year, but after a mini hiatus, we're ready. We're ready to do this.
Yes. But before we get into this episode, we should talk about the podcast because with every new year, we make a few improvements. Yeah.
Yeah. I think when the podcast first started, it was just like
so
it was so long. It was us talking to the biz for, I think the record was like 1 hour, 56 minutes.
Yeah, we were getting close to 2 hours.
So every year we kind of take a look back at the content, kind of figure out a way to make it a little bit more succinct, but still helpful, and we still get you that juicy science goodness. So this year we're breaking it up a little bit differently.
Yeah, we always say at the start of the year, this is going to be shorter, to the point, like gets our message across. But we just keep somehow by the end of the year, it's still like an hour long. And we just realize that, with every deep dive we do, we want to spend more time in the product landscape.
Yep.
That ultimately is where it's more actionable, where you guys can take what we share and that knowledge and commit to products. All right. So for this year, we are still going to have our long form episodes where we answer burning questions that y'all have. But to follow up, we are going to dedicate a shorter episode to the products that are on the topic that we were talking about. So like today, we're going to be answering the question, should you be using PDRN in your skincare routine? And then the week after, we follow up with a shorter segment on products pertaining to the deep dive episode. And next week, Laura and I will be reviewing the popular Medicube PDRN Pink Peptide Serum. And we do a head-to-head with VT PDRN, the 100 Essence.
Yeah, so we hope you guys like this new format, and it's going to be, and Victoria and I will be personally trying these products. We'll give the ingredient list, a breakdown, our chemist view on the formula, but also our personal feels as someone with dry skin and someone with oily skin, and what our experience is with these products.
So let's get right into it. We are going to be answering the question, what is PDRN?
So PDRN actually stands for polydeoxyribonucleotide. And if you remember from good old high school biology, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. So this is a DNA fragment. And by definition, we're talking about DNA fragments about 50 to 1500 kilodaltons. And the real old school PDRN kind of research actually started from human placenta. Today, most of the therapeutic PDRN and topical PDRN are actually derived from salmon sperm. The reason why people choose salmon sperm wasn't because they're just like, salmon produce a lot of sperm. What can we do with this? But they were actually looking at salmon jizz, I should probably call it sperm, because the breakdown of the DNA found in the composition thereof is actually very similar to the composition of human DNA. And that's why they thought, hey, the similarity between that and the DNA fragments we can get from placenta should mean it has therapeutic benefits as well, right? So that's where it all started.
So basically, this episode is going to be focusing on PDRN and the salmon sperm kind. When we were dabbling in the research, we start looking at sourcing. And yes, sourcing is going to be a big subject here. We're just going to share kind of a taste of the kind of science you might encounter when you're starting to look at sourcing. We'll put up just general diagram on salmon sperm and their, I guess, ties to possible health benefits. You'll see here, it doesn't tell you much. And this is I think it sets the tone of just the assortment of science you'll be encountering on this episode.
Yeah, 100%. When we polled people on your PDRN questions, and 90% of it was like, what does it do?
Yeah.
And it's actually a great question, one that we had trouble answering ourselves because of graphs like this. As a general, this is from a review paper. So even in the academic realm, this is how they talk about it. It almost feels like a general catch-all.
Yeah.
Like salmon DNA can be anti-apoptosis, anti-inflammatory, anti-ulcer, wound healing, tissue damage, will cook your clothes, will cook your clothes, will cook your dinner, clean your laundry, you know, just do everything for you. But it almost feels like a very, to me, when it's a catch-all like that, it just feels like they're trying to sell unicorn tears.
Yes. So I will say, like, we probably spent most of our time filtering out relevant science because as we talk about kind of the origin of PDRN and its health benefits, you'll see it's a lot wider and broader than you probably imagine. It is not it did not start in the skincare realm. There's another great table that we want to show that goes into the salmon sperm sourcing of PDRN and ultimately shows you kind of the process it takes to actually extract the PDRN. And the thing that's like really tough and why it takes so much, I guess, just filtering from our standpoint is that there's actually a lot of work done on the actual sourcing side, but then you have to like figure out, like you have to find it amongst all that generalized, theorized benefits. And like, I think that was like probably the bigger pain point when we talk about this.
Yeah, so we'll put this table out for those of you who are curious. I'm going to run through it super quickly. You get the salmon sperm. It's stored by, it's frozen, so it's stored. And once you thaw it, you have to pop the cells to get to the DNA that's in the nuclei. And after that, you have to sterilize it, and then you chop out these DNA into DNA pieces. And all that is done in solution. So at the very, very end of it, once you have your DNA slurry that you want, the PDRN slurry, you have to dry it back down to a powder. So as you can imagine, this is pretty intensive. We won't share all the details here, but PDRN that's sourced from other types of organisms, plant or other animal, go through a similar process, but there are quirks to all of them. So this is what we're going to keep reiterating on, which is how important sourcing is to what it actually does. Before we get into PDRN in skincare, we should talk about how the background of PDRN treatments, even though PDRN is positioned as a catch-all, ultimately it is positioned as an adenosine receptor. It first caught people's eyes because it interacts directly with your adenosine receptors. That is a term we haven't talked about on this podcast.
We don't want to.
But it is an important pathway. Yes. There are a lot of different types of adenosine receptors on skin, in your body. And generally speaking, it is linked to a lot of inflammation type of pathways.
Yeah. And, you know, you can actually find adenosine in your skincare, although topically there's a whole nother mystery there. So we won't spend too much time on the actual mechanism because that will take way more than just an hour. But ultimately, that's what caught the eye of researchers. And yeah, Gloria found a great paper that actually looks at the anti-inflammatory benefits of PDRN to treat things like diabetic foot ulcer, something you didn't think about you'd hear about today.
So what they did was it's actually a pretty sizable study. It's N equals 100 in each group. This was an Italian study published about 10 years ago. And what they did, this is very intensive. We love that's placebo controlled. And what they did in each of the group is on one side, they inject PDRN into the lesion. On the other side, they inject a placebo daily for 8 weeks. And the result is interesting. It shows that PDRN does do something. And I'm just going to read some top line stats. So after 8 weeks, 18.9% of placebo group was fully healed compared to 37.3% of the PDRN group. Median reepithelialized area is 49.3 for the placebo group and a whopping 82.2 for the PDRN group. And this was one of the studies that's done on PDRN as ulcer wound healing kind of therapeutic type of application. But people are like, it make you regrow skin? Me thinks I can use this for beauty.
And so to sum up, in terms of this PDRN intro, PDRN are DNA fragments are originally sourced from salmon sperm. That's the main one. The original health benefit claims really started in the anti-inflammatory realm with possible wound healing claims. But up next, we're going to be discussing PDRN for skin. With that, let's take a quick break. Guys, finally, Balm Voyage is back. Did we say beginning of January? We meant end of January.
I feel like for a long time followers, they know to take that date with a grain of salt. But you've probably heard us on multiple occasions discuss the saga that is the Balm Voyage. Long story short, nothing ambitious usually goes very smoothly, but we are super proud to finally have our occlusive champion back in all of its glory. It's gotten quite a glow up both inside and out.
So not only does Balm Voyage look different, it uses a 50% PCR tube and is now fully recyclable. But the formula itself also has one more active, and that is in the form of our Shea complex that tackles chapped skin. That's on top of our whopping 1% ceramide NP and our potent Boswellia serrata soother. So if you've been wanting to try this balm, we know there's a few of you that's been waiting for a really long time.
Sorry.
Please use our brand new promo code CCPodcast 2025 for 15% off your first order and get your hands on this cult favorite dry skin and soothing salve. Enjoy, guys. All right, we are back. So let's talk science of PDRN in skincare.
Goodbye. All right, guys, I'm not gonna lie. This was a really painful one to put together. To start, before we dive into any of this, right, our main focus is always talk about at-home topical skincare you can buy on the market and use at home. But PDRN really has its roots in in-office treatment. It started out with, you might have heard of its trade name, Rejurong or Rejuvenex. These are treatments you can get in office. It's basically microneedling with PDRN. Because of this, I think nowadays a lot of the new topical tech, like exosome, actually have this in-office background. Wading through the data and discerning between more in-office oriented type of treatment versus home use is a nightmare.
And also, in-office solutions and treatments is a whole nother realm of wild west in terms of claims that are stated, in terms of benefits, and sourcing is incredibly mysterious here. So I'll be honest, just like Gloria mentioned, this is exactly a similar scenario to exosomes. But let's talk about topically.
So first, the main question is just how does PDRN even work on skin? Like we mentioned, it targets adenosine receptors. That's a theory that's tested in vitro. Very specifically, the A2A receptors you might see in communications here and there. There's also A1, A2B, A3 receptors. Not gonna get into it, but it focuses on the A2A receptor because this one, particularly in skin cells, is associated with regulating inflammatory responses, cell proliferation, and also collagen production. At this point of doing the podcast, I feel like everything goes back to collagen.
We will... Gloria found a really great review paper that we think summarizes some of the testing in this realm pretty well. We're actually going to share a snapshot of the compiled testing up here.
If you're watching on YouTube, pause and take a minute. It is a big chart. And I do really want to mention that this paper was published December 2024. So a lot of episodes will mention that, like, hey, we might be missing something.
Yeah, because the best review paper we found is actually one that's in 96.
Right. So on and so forth. Not the case here. This tech is new.
Yeah. And what's great about it is they've actually broken down the testing based on certain benefits. So they've got a segment on anti-aging, anti-hyperpigmentation. They're looking at it as an antioxidant as well as even wound healing. And as you scroll down, you will realize a few things. First one being the actual number of clinical tests that are relevant and are used as a topical. Take a moment. It's hard. There's only 2. It's so little.
Yeah. So again, going back to what Victoria said, if you look at the first column of this table, anti-aging, anti-hyperpigmentation,
it looks very robust.
Yeah, and this chart is not short, and you got antioxidant. So you're like, oh wow, this really is a catch-all, like amazing skin ingredient that does it all. And then you look at the second column, which breaks it down by the source of PDRN. You're like, okay, I see salmon, I see some trout, I see salmon, human, salmon. And you realize, hold on the market, there's a lot of other sources of PDRN.
Plant.
What do we make of that? Well, I'll get into it. And then you have the third column, which gives you a summary of the test. And like Victoria mentioned, if you scroll down really fast, you're like, okay, look for clinical.
Look for in vivo.
Yeah, I see. I see a couple of clinical trials. Very, very cool. And then you click into it, and it is using it as an injection. And some of them, kind of like the foot ulcer study, is using it as a very intensive daily injection to see that benefit.
So, with that, let's look at the actually relevant. So we're going to, start weeding all these out. The actually relevant clinical testing that uses PDRN as a topical. We've got one. Done a test at 40 subjects, Gloria.
This is an N=40 study, or 2 per group. We do love these 2 group studies where it is bench against a placebo. So at least we we can say more confidently that the PDRN in the study does something. So what they did is they used it topically on skin graft sites. And again, going back to what is usually looked at, wound healing, skin re-epithelialization. And at the end of the study, they saw that, I'm going to quote the result here. It says, in the PDRN group, dressing procedure were not painful, whereas in the control, they often were. This didn't come, it was more an anecdotal comment rather than a number, but they did measure the re-epithelialization rates in these groups. In the salmon PDRN group, it started as fast as 12.5 days versus in the placebo group, it didn't begin until about 24 days. So you can see that PDRN seems to really promote regeneration and the skin wound healing process. There are no infection.
I think if you just look at here, this statement, interesting, helps with skin growth. This is the problem with topical data, especially like this, is skin graft sites in terms of penetration very different than just regular healthy skin.
Your skin be open already.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why Gloria and I have a lot of concerns, because PDRN, for the most part, in terms of data, it really looks like penetration is a really big issue here.
Yep. So there's one more study that is done as a topical treatment, and I'm going to read you how it's described in the summary chart we posted earlier. So this was filed under scar prevention, and they wrote, italicized, clinical trial. And it says,
Juicy.
PDRN topical applied plus other therapy after 10 days. I'm like, okay, not a very long time, but scar prevention, that's pretty cool. And in the review paper, they said that it decreased global acne scarring system score from 21 down to 15. I was like,
seems significant.
In just 10 days. Well, that's amazing. So we pulled the paper, and I'm going to read you the description. You heard that correctly, a singular 43-year-old male present with acne scars since 5 years ago.
Okay.
So long-term acne scar. Dermatological findings reveal atrophic acne scars, ice pick, boxcar, rolling types on forehead, nose, and cheeks. Diagnosis established as moderate atrophic acne scars with global acne scarring system is 21. Patients were treated with blunt cannula subcision, which is basically just cutting scar removal, physical.
Gloria's using a U-shaped motion and a scooping motion for audio.
And then this patient also got hyaluronic acid filler, microneedling radio frequency, a 90% trichloroacetic acid chemical reconstruction of skin scars. That's called a TCA cross, and application of salmon PDRN. Woo! And then patients received topical 0.05% retinoic acid, 4% niacinamide, and sunscreen daily.
I wanted to scroll back to what was the actual verbiage used, plus other therapy.
Plus other therapy.
You know what's funny is, as you read this, a 43-year-old male, I'm like, okay, I'm out. And then you started talking about treatment. I'm like, go on.
Yep.
Wow.
Yes. And then
thinks this is not an ad for PDRN.
After all that, in 10 days, the scar score decreased to 15.
Like, it better decrease to 15, goddammit.
Dude, you threw the kitchen sink at this poor man. He's probably really hurting after all of this. Let me recap, generally speaking, what happened to this guy. They scalped out, they cut out some of the scars, they applied TCA, which is a medium depth like peel ingredient that can really hurt, and then after that
microneedling radio frequency type,
and then you
AJ filler,
dab on some of that PDRN afterwards and be like, shh, it's okay. And then
but also take some tretinoin and niacinamide
and
sunscreen.
And sunscreen. Don't forget sunscreen. Then 10 days, ta-da. I'm like, I am more offended that score hasn't gone down to 0 yet after all that. So
the man got new skin is what I assume happened, I hope. And guess what? That's it. That's all the clinical topical data to share. Yes.
All right, we're going to attempt to sum this up really quickly. So based on the review table, first of all, sourcing does matter. Totally. And most of the testing is still on salmon PDRN. What you can get in office, most of those are salmon PDRN. Very few are actually for human placenta. So that is still what we would, if you want to try it, that's what we would recommend.
Injection.
Yes, just get it done in office. Then in terms of what it does for skin, you will hear PDRN be touted for everything.
So many things.
And anything. Pigmentation, PDRN. Anti-aging, PDRN. Got skin texture issues, PDRN.
Antioxidant,
PDRN.
Scars,
PDRN. So its position is everything. Even topical treatments. Reading like your marketing promo, I'm like, Victoria, what does this do for me?
So that was the thing I wanted to mention was like this whole time we were talking about this, I think every single convo ends is, I still don't know what it truly does topically in skincare. But with that, and to sum up, so hopefully that gives you a snapshot of the data available. However, the skincare realm has absolutely exploded, and just within us working on this episode, there's been more PDRN launches. So let's talk about that in our final segment. But first, a much needed break. Let's do the Animal Fun Fact Corner. Yay! Okay. All right. A lot of you guys don't know how much joy we get from people that bring up the animal fun fact. Recently, there was a listener that mentioned that they were reminded of the camel beauty pageant, which is not last year's episode. That is like 2 years ago.
I love that one.
And it just, we were so happy. So today is my turn. And today I'd like to talk about another beauty pageant. And this is run by the British Tarantula Society's exhibition contest. If you are curious, it is happening this year on May 18th. And it is going to be in Leamington. All right.
If you are vacation planning, consider.
So, if you're wondering what qualifies as a beautiful tarantula, I have some metrics for you. First of all, they look at leg count. And the wording they use is anything under or over 8 is unacceptable. And when I read that, I got so creeped out. As 8 is already too many legs, but when you think about like that they have less or more, you're like immediately
I find that to be tarantula ableist.
Yeah.
Like, so what if my tarantula has 7? It doesn't mean it's less
Still
beautiful.
A beautiful tarantula. Yes.
And also, what gives it over 8?
I don't know. So that's why I found that fascinating. They also look at how healthy they are. I don't really know what that means. I couldn't find more info, but from what I understand of tarantulas, they are a bit moody. So like,
I have heard they're like
what that
grumpy.
means. Yeah, like their active level or whatnot. But and then, in terms of aesthetically, they have actually mentioned that recently molted spiders have the best chance when their colors are the glossiest or brightest. And I don't know why, but just like molting, I'm like, oh. So yeah, they also have a rule that if you're actually, if you want to touch one, in case you really want to touch one, you're actually not allowed to.
Boom! And I have to cancel my ticket to Leamington now.
Can't pet a tarantula. Apparently they're actually pretty fragile, and when they're dropped, they can actually die. I didn't know that. I thought they were very like hardy things. But anyways, that's the animal fun fact. I'm sure you really wanted to know and have that, be a memory.
For everyone's sanity, we will not post past pageant winners from this tarantula contest.
No, I couldn't do it.
So we will let you Google it yourself. And also, kind of my curiosity from, like based on the camel episode we did is, how do people cheat?
I don't know. I couldn't find anything. I mean, it honestly seems very wholesome, like a very friendly, like homegrown community of people. So I actually don't know. I don't think there is. And it seems subjective because this is honestly all the like judging guidelines I could find.
I'm going to make a tarantula shine spray to give your tarantula that freshly molted look.
There you
so
go.
It's pageant ready.
Yeah. Think of all the hair care that could go into it.
Tiny little combs. Yeah. Put it on your fingers so you can brush all the legs.
Yeah. What's also like mildly adorable if you trying to detach from the whole spider connection is they actually also have like spider art judging. So like people like paintings, like pictures, like they give awards for them too. Honestly, if you replace tarantula and you put like type of bird species, you'd be like, this is an adorable community. But like the fact that it's like tarantulas, and also they've expanded to scorpions, which I'm sure you find even more interesting. I'm like, I can't do it.
My husband has a deep fear of spiders, and my household, I mean, I live by myself for a long time, so I have no problem like catching bugs and killing bugs and stuff like that. But for the most part, I can just send him towards roaches or whatever, you know. Spiders, he won't do it. It's my job to like get spiders out. I usually don't like killing them, so unless it's really gnarly, I try to throw them out.
Me too, yeah.
And then you used to creep him out when I just take a cup and where's the spider? And they're like, ah! I must take him to Leamington on May 18th.
Don't tell him what it is. Be like, hey, I'm so excited for this animal beauty pageant.
For our 10th anniversary. Leamington we go.
I truly feel like the Friends episode where Joey's like, I feel like that thing's on me. I truly feel that sometimes looking at the tarantulas, like they have a few where they showcase like in terms of beauty or just exotic look, and they truly look exotic, but I don't know why. The more exotic they look, the more like, Yeah. GBs. All right. Okay. So that's the animal fun fact.
We're starting off 2025 with a bang. I love it.
All right. We're going to wrap this up. Let's talk PDRN landscape.
Yes.
And definitely just want to remind everyone, we're actually going to go do a deep dive next week into 2 very specific products. Let's talk about what you're going to look for when you're shopping. And ultimately, the first thing that we've already touted this whole episode is sourcing.
Yes. So we will prioritize. If you're really curious about this, make sure you get it. Make sure you get the ones that's derived from salmon. It's just the one that's most well studied. And with anything we do, like in terms of exosomes and DNA fragments and peptides, this, because it's such a wide range, and remember, salmon was picked originally because of its similarities to human DNA, that composition matters. And the reality is, other than the sourcing, what that composition is a mystery. And
yeah,
so
we've actually talked about the process of isolating this PDRN complex. Obviously, the quality of the complex, we haven't even gotten into the actual integrity of the PDRN itself. And so with that, it's like, yeah, you have to go for the actual sourcing that is actually looked at.
Yeah. But of course, knowing that your skincare comes from salmon sperm can creep some people out. So you're going to see a lot of vegan PDRN derivatives. And one of the most popular types come from ginseng, which is, we have an episode actually dedicated to that last year. It's its own little
Also
funky,
very fun.
Yeah, very funky topic, but that's one of the more popular vegan PDRNs you can find. You're also going to start to see it from other vegetable sources, but they actually did a study on ginseng PDRN, so we're going to run through it really quickly to kind of highlight why we have trouble recommending that vegan source PDRN.
And I also want to preface that this is actually the touted Panax PDRN complex that is used and claimed by VT. So further interest into this specific material. All right. So with that, this study actually, the one good thing I think that is noteworthy here is that they do actually validate that this ginseng PDRN can actually interact with the desired adenosine receptor, that A2A that Gloria mentions. However, in terms of the actual testing on skin topically is where things start to get a little dicey. The first thing we should mention here is that they're not actually testing on human skin. They actually test it on a 3D skin model, which is like one removed. Yeah, it's like one removed. It's like, yes, you can flag for certain behaviors, but again, skin is incredibly complex, and it's a reason why 3D skin model is really just used as a quick beta test than actual takeaways.
Yeah, think about it as a red light, green light type of study to make sure that it kind of does something before you proceed with more intensive studies. Yeah. So this test, so I should mention that in this paper, they did a lot of different tests, like a lot of in vitro validation to kind of see what it does. But to us, like, that's a lot of mumble jumble. This is the most interesting part where they benched it against other interesting ingredients like retinoic acid. So, to dive into the study, basically, long story short, with the 3D skin model that Victoria mentioned, they irritate skin with 2% SDS, which is a type of very irritating surfactant. And then they apply the products to see how it regenerates. Which is very much in line with the type of function that salmon PDRN is supposed to do. We should mention that this wasn't benched against salmon DNA. This was tested by itself. The bench is retinoic acid at different levels. I find this to be kind of humorous. So in one test, they tested 0.05 PDRN, 0.5 PDRN, and 5% PDRN bench against retinoic acid. And the takeaway is that, it seems to do pretty well.
Yeah, and I think if you show the actual results here, and if you actually, look at the caption and kind of talk about how they're looking at, even like a wound healing assay, and their wound healing assay, they're looking at ranges of 5% to 50%. So long story short, we're just going to say it doesn't feel like concentration has truly been dialed in. Yeah. And this is that study to kind of figure out what are those parameters. Another thing about 3D skin modeling is that some of these tests are, in some ways, the SES is actually pretty common for regular skin, but in terms of wound healing, they actually run a re-epithelialization study and a tear study. These are not as commonly used
for skincare ingredients.
Yeah, and for me, ultimately, it's like, my takeaway here is there's potential, but there's still so much more that needs to be done to understand. It's like, okay, like Laura said, this is a green light to keep going.
And I will say, after all this, when I was going through the paper, I was like, okay, well, at least they did something and it's something to talk about. We don't quite know what it is topically yet, but green light to keep going. Cool. And then I read the conclusion. They wrote, furthermore, the expression patterns of ECAD and P63 revealed that Panax PDRN was more effective in restoring skin barrier function than tretinoin.
Ooh.
What?
Yeah, it's like you're in a race and you're taking your first step. And then you're like, you just like jump to the finish line. And you're like, I made it. Like, it's just, there's so much, like, you didn't really know what happened in between the first step and the finish line.
Yeah. So it was a very weird statement and a really big leap to make. So the reason why we decided to go into the study a little bit more is because this is actually the gold standard of where plant-based PDRN is at, right? The Panax version has been validated to also target the A2A receptor, like the salmon one. No topicals. There's not even therapeutic type studies of it being injected in skin, at least not to the same scale as the salmon-based one. This is already pretty decent.
Yeah, and the other thing that I kind of thought of, and it's a little off tangent here, is that, you know how we've been talking about sourcing, right? One of the bigger issues is concentration. And this is not like a one-to-one scenario in comparison to salmon PDRN as well. And, you know, in terms of the sourcing side, the actual yield and activity of these materials are very different. So, and that was the one thing we really want to point out is like, yes, if you are very for vegan claims, salmon PDRN is not ideal. However, in terms of actual yield and activity, it's significantly higher than any of these plant-based materials. And it's also why you'll see the concentrations vary so widely, and why it almost feels like you're like, oh, well, if I go with this vegan one, I get so much more. And it's like so much more of the actual active solution, but it takes that much to get that kind of activity.
Yeah, 100%. When I read the paper, I actually thought it was like kind of humorous that the range is 0.05 to 50. It's just like, please do something, please do something, please do something is what it feels like.
Yeah. So with that, that's the, you know, plant-based PDRN realm. Now, in terms of skincare.
Dear Victoria, would you spend your very, very own hard-earned money on topical PDRN skincare?
Okay, 2025, I'm trying to be more objective. Objectively speaking, there's not a lot of data that says this is a must in your skincare. Okay, if you feel like this is definitely the skincare for fun
that's
category,
a good way to put it, yeah.
You know, so that is my objective statement here. But this is not going to go away.
Right.
We already know there's, not even from a product launch side, from a material side, there's more and more PDRN ingredients that are coming. So who knows? Like, who knows what that means for actual ingredient vetting as we go, especially if the awareness continues to build. So
I think for me, what I cannot wrap my head around is, what does it do?
Yes.
Right? When we make
skincare for fun.
Yes.
You don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah. So like, to me, because we have to spend so much time like testing new products and whatnot, for something to make it to stick in my routine, I have to use it for a reason, like an actual reason. And PDRN really just falls in that like, oh, well, why not kind of category. And to me, like, I just don't have room for, well, why not in my routine. So that's why.
And I think, again, putting this in the exosome space, that kind of like hype science. And another feeling I had is like, this is such a classic example of like hyped marketing ingredients in skincare. Like, comes from a source that didn't actually start in skincare, but has like some science to give it some relevancy. And then it gets dumped, and there's no validation of what it does topically. This is a classic scenario. This is not like colored me shocked that they did this.
Yeah,
you know, like
100%.
This happens all the time, and it's just a matter of, okay, if we are interested as users, then what are they going to do to show for it, like to actually show what it does?
So, Victoria, between topical exosomes and topical PDRN,
I know you're going to ask this.
If you're going to pick one.
Honestly, I still think exosomes have a little bit, and that's like a little bit more leg on it.
8 legs, 8 beautiful legs.
I think it's missing. I don't know if it has the full 8 legs. I gotta be honest, but it's got legs. You know? So, I mean, with that, and that's of the human variety, not of the plant variety. But again, like, cost of exosome skincare is really high. So I just feel like I'm just going to shelve all of that in I will monitor.
I think that's fair because I think for me, I couldn't wrap my head around PDRN permanently because of the data side. But then for exosome, it's like, well, it's so expensive. Why don't I just get it done in an office? So I will say, in terms of pricing, it's not offensive.
Yes.
It's like easy to try. So that's why,
skincare.
that's why we classify it as.
I was also gonna say, I think we actually looked at the in-office side of these ingredients, and the PDRN side is a little more sketch in terms of I think claims and sourcing, and just there's so little transparency on the material. So that also kind of has like colored my opinion in terms of ranking these two. But that's it.
So anyway, that is our PDRN and the science behind PDRN episode. Yes. So next episode, we're going to do a deep dive into a review of the 2 most popular PDRN skincare products out there. And we'll see you guys next week. Hold on, where can they find this, Victoria?
I was like, I'm on.
Where can they find this, Victoria?
I was thinking, do you think we still need that part?
I don't know. Why don't you tell us if you need us to tell you where to
You can find us at Instagram, chemist.confessions, where we poll you guys for all of our episodes, and they truly do shape each and every one of them. You can write to us at info@chemistconfessions.com with all of your burning skincare questions, or you can even just leave a comment in the YouTube video below. And finally, we are on TikTok, although please don't DM us there because we will not respond. But otherwise, we hope you enjoy this episode. We will see you next week. Bye!